This is Bible Prophecy Lesson number 117, Micah chapter 5. This is being re-recorded because on Sunday the 1st, the recording failed. Not only did it fail, I did it again and it failed. This is the 5th time now that I'm recording this. There must be something that's really aggravating Satan over this, so you may want to pay attention. Maybe there's something here that really makes him mad. At least I hope there is. So at any rate, today it's Micah chapter 5. We'll start off with our standard format of reviewing the previous chapter, chapter 4. I got lots of pictures for you of potential Nibiru sightings. And then we'll have a scripture of the day, and then I'll get into Micah chapter 5, moving right along. In chapter 4, we remember that in the last days there will be a singular mountain in the planet Earth. That will be the mountain of the Lord. It will be located in Jerusalem. Zechariah 14 tells us the dimensions of it and where it'll be. And on top of that mountain, we know that there will be a temple, and in that temple a Holy of Holies, and in the Holy of Holies will be the Messiah. And from the Messiah will flow rivers of living water. We know all the details of that from Ezekiel chapter 47. The flowing forth of living waters that are miraculous in that they start out as a trickle and they multiply until they are a raging river, and they flow down and they cleanse the land. And during that time, which will be the millennial reign, all the nations will stream to Jerusalem to learn of the Lord. They will recognize that the true God of the world, the universe, is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he is there in residence in Jerusalem. And if you want to learn the ways of the Lord, there you must go. And it's at that time that nations will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. This is the admonition that's written over the United Nations building in New York. I am sure they don't realize that what they are asking for there is the return of the Messiah. Because if they understood that, they certainly wouldn't put this admonition over their headquarters. So, during that time, the Lord will assemble the outcasts of Israel on that day and make them a strong nation. And we know exactly what will happen there. The outcasts of Israel will be all over the world. And according to Matthew 24, the angelic hosts will be gathering them as Jesus is descending and the great trumpet is blowing. And as we read in Isaiah, the last verse of chapter 27, at the blowing of that great trumpet, all of Israel will be regathered. That phrase is used several places in the Old Testament, and it's not complete. We don't know how that they will be gathered, but we know from Matthew 24 that the angels will do the gathering, and it completes our understanding of that part of God's plan. And of course, at that time, Israel will thresh the nations, and their wealth will be given to the Lord. The mechanism for threshing the nations is found in Zechariah 14 also, because it says there that during that period of time, all nations will come to Jerusalem and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And if you know anything about the Feast of Tabernacles, it requires that you bring a great deal of your goods and sacrifice them. And that's going to be the burden on the nations. They have to come, they have to bring the appropriate sacrifices, and any nation that doesn't come gets no rain the following year. A real good incentive to show up. So those are the high points of Micah chapter 4. Now, well, in the recent past, I showed you a picture of Virgo in the infrared spectrum from Google Sky, and for some strange reason, they blocked out a very strong infrared source there on the leg of Virgo. And now that piques my curiosity. Anytime somebody like Google blocks out a piece of the sky, there's got to be a reason for that. And my suspicion is because they're trying to at least disguise the coming of Nibiru or whatever that thing is called. And sure enough, I looked a little further And if you go to NASA Skyview IRAS site, it's there. For some reason, they didn't get the message, and so we can see exactly what this something is that was blacked out in Google Sky. And it just looks like a pair of dots there, surrounded by green with what appears to be red teeth in front. I mean, if you have a pretty good imagination, you could envision this is the head of a dragon coming at you. And indeed, that's what the author of Revelation in chapter 12, John, said that he saw in the sky a red dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns, and had a tail that knocked a third of the stars of the sky down to the ground. Now, we're finding out that Revelation chapter 12 chapter has more than one meaning, and we're going to get into that here just a little bit. I want to show you some other pictures too. There's a lady named Cyphers. She has her own YouTube address, and all she does, she doesn't talk, all she does is she goes around Europe and monitors webcams for weather. And there are a lot of ski resorts that if you want to know what the weather is like there, well, you can just dial them up and see what's going on. Well, these webcams are aimed at the rising and setting of the sun. And strange things are showing up on these webcams. These are not professional cameras by any stretch. They're not astronomical or they're not telescopes. They're just, excuse me, just webcams shooting up at the sky. And this one, this particular picture was taken on the 27th of December in Gampeln, Switzerland, high up in the Alps. And you'll notice that the sun, which is in the lower right here, is, there's just some anomalous planet over the top of the sun. Sure would think that NASA would be curious about that, wouldn't you? Here's a blow-up of it, and you can see that the planet has stripes on it, and my suspicion is that this is probably the red or brown dwarf sun that is the center of the planetary system Nibiru, which is headed in our direction. Here's another webcam in Sestri, Italy, on the 23rd of last month. And once again, you see the sun rising, and then you got this anomalous orb on the left of it. Looks like that's probably some planet, or maybe that's Nibiru himself. Here's another one at Ultimo, Italy, and on the 29th, and you can see another planetary body of sorts above the sun, and perhaps one off to the left of it. And so here's another one. It looks like there's 2 suns over Alaska. Now the first sun is over here to the right of the picture. You can't see it. But the second one appears to be a bright white object, and above the white object is a red object. My suspicion is that red object is probably the red dwarf of the Nibiru planetary system, and that reflecting body below it's probably one of its planets. Here's another picture from Gampeln, Switzerland. This one's on the 30th. The same story. When the sun rises, I mean, that is a planet of some kind, either a planet or the brown dwarf star. Looks like it's got those streaks in it, as we've seen before. Now here's another picture from South Alaska, and you can see a big lens flare off to the far left of the sun, and then between the sun and that lens flare, there's another planet. Looks like it's also got the stripes in it too. Here's a blow of that, and from the blow up, it doesn't appear to me that it's got stripes in it at all. It appears like this is some other planetary system, possibly one of the planets in orbit around the Nemesis brown dwarf star. Here's another one, South Germany, that clearly shows an object behind the sun being illuminated by the sun, considerably smaller than the sun. But once again, you got 2 suns. Now, you don't have to believe in this Nibiru business if you don't want to, but you really should come to a conclusion about what we're seeing in the sky. Well, we're clearly not being told the truth here. The people at NASA know full well what's going on. We've had the space telescope that has been turned on and been watching this thing forever. And there are those at NASA who have seen it, and you can find their reports on the web, what they saw. My word, what they're seeing is a planetary system headed this way, surrounded by a red cloud of iron particles. Some of the particles are dust. Some of the particles, they say, weigh about 100 pounds. And then there are some planetary systems, asteroids being sucked along with this thing that are 300 miles in diameter. But the one guy I listened to said that there were not millions or billions of pieces of junk being flung along with this system, but trillions. And so we know from the Revelation account that at some point in time, the earth is going to be pounded by meteorites that weigh about 100 pounds. And my suspicion is that will occur when we pass through the tail of this system. The size of the tail, is what's been reported at least, you don't know what to believe, but it's about 1 million miles wide and about 1 million miles long. So it's going to take some time for the earth to go through that tail if and when we do. And you just look at all of the issues that John raised in Revelation, talking about, things falling out of the sky, and earthquakes, and collapsing mountains, and islands being swept away, and roaring of the seas, and all of these things you can deduce from a close passage of this planetary system with the earth. And if that's the case, the end of the age is upon us. Here's another picture from, this is Ultimo, Italy on the 1st. If you'll look there to the right of the sunrise, you will see a planetary system, once again with stripes on it, probably the brown dwarf. So June Cyphers, like I said, she doesn't talk. All she does is go to these sites and record them and stick them on the web. So everybody in high altitudes now that has a clear view of the sun when it rises can see what's coming our way, and it doesn't look real promising. Here's our verse for the day, our scripture for the day in Luke 21. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with great power and glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Man, that time in Luke 24 is this time. We are seeing things coming our way that causes men to fear and tremble and run to the hills, try to hide from what's coming upon them. And these things that were written regarding this time of tribulation have been interpreted by some as just, similes or metaphors or something of that nature. No, they were literal. And they are literally going to be fulfilled. And this is a sobering event that's coming upon us. And as you've heard me say in the past, when these events begin to take place, everything that man has placed his faith upon in this world will be shaken. Even the ground on which you stand. Everything that you think is going to get you through the next day, the next hour, the next minute, it will be shaken. There will be no solid ground. The only ground will be the foundation, which is Jesus Christ. If you don't have your faith in him, everything else will be taken from you. And our only hope in surviving this is that he will come and rescue us. The word is harpazo. In the Greek, the catching away, the rapture of the church, which means, by the way, another meaning of harpazo is to rescue from the danger of destruction. Here you have the danger of destruction coming upon us. And the question is, wherein lies your faith? Now for Micah chapter 5. Gather yourself in troops, O daughter of troops. He has laid siege against us, and they will strike the judge of Israel with a rod on the cheek. Well, this passage is a foretelling, a prophecy of an event which occurred. If you'll recall, when Christ was being in the process of being crucified, they did horrible things to him. His body, according to Isaiah 53, was in such a condition that it didn't even look human. He was beaten, he was bitten, at least one account, and Job indicates that his internal organs were hanging out. I mean, he was beat to a bloody pulp. It was awful. But also, along with everything else that he endured, he was hit in the head with a rod. And this word reed in the New Testament can equally be interpreted as a rod. It was a horrible thing. Now, the long and the short of this, though, is, as it says in Isaiah 53, that he suffered this in our place. This was the punishment due us. And in our place he went willingly. And therefore, our debt to him is eternal. Moving on in chapter 5, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler of Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. This is a characterization of the birth of Christ. He will be born in Bethlehem, according to this prophecy, and he will be the ruler of Israel, and it gives us a clue into his nature. He is everlasting. He is the Son of God, but yet he is God. He is one of that triune element of God that, of course, we can't perfectly understand here, but we know that he went in our place and has certainly standing at the right hand of the Father right now. But the interesting part about this is where he was born. He was born in Bethlehem. In the Hebrew, that is Beit Lehem, which means the house of bread. And certainly that is appropriate because Jesus is the source of bread. He is the bread of life. Highly appropriate that the bread of life would be born in the house of bread. And we know from Luke chapter 2 that when Joseph and Mary went up to Judea, as was required by the law for a census, they stopped at Bethlehem, and those days where she was very much large with child, she was delivered. And as you recall in our last lesson or so, the place that she was delivered was in a manger, and the manger was in the region of what is called the Tower of the Flock, which we have read before. And that Tower of the Flock was the field in which the sacrificial lambs were kept by the shepherds. And those shepherds that saw the angelic host on high were undoubtedly the shepherds who were given charge to maintain the flock that was to be sacrificed. And all of these lambs were given special care, and there was a manger in which they were born. And history says that when the sacrificial lambs were born, they were wrapped in swaddling clothes. And so here we have Jesus, the Lamb of God, born in a manger just like those lambs and wrapped in swaddling clothes. The story just gets more amazing every time you hear more about it. And therefore he shall therefore he shall give them up until the time that she who is in labor has given birth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return to the children of Israel. This birth business, you can interpret that as Mary giving birth. Pardon me. And it's possible that it has a double meaning. And that double meaning might mean that we're talking about the woman in Revelation chapter 12 who was given birth. That would be that sign in the heavens of Virgo, being clothed with the sun, a crown of 12 stars overhead and the moon at her feet. We know that that is a singular moment in time, and that her birth, she births a man-child who was caught up to heaven. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along here. In Revelation chapter 12, just to read that passage, it says, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads." Now, this may be that Micah chapter may very well be referring to the birth of the church. And that birth process is immediately followed by a catching up of that man-child. Now, here is the Nibiru planetary system, which is currently in the process of invading Earth, if we can believe anything we see. And the interesting part about this is the nature of the system. The system is composed of, from what we can tell, just like John said, it had 7 heads. It means it has 7 planets and 10 horns. My interpretation of the 10 horns is there's probably 10 moons around those 7 planets. But if you look at it, and this picture was taken from, if I'm correct, I believe this was taken from the South Pole satellite in 2008. And they saw this thing coming, and it has characterized by what appears to be a bloody mass surrounded by 4 of these larger planets. And if you just connect the dots on here, you've got a cross. In fact, the word Nibiru means planet of the crossing. I think you could interpret that as planet of the cross also. But this thing looks like a cross. And as we know from Matthew 24, at the end of the tribulation, that people of the world see the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, and they are scared to death. My suspicion is what they're going to see is this sign of the cross headed right at them, that it will have a direct hit on planet Earth unless those days be shortened. And according to Matthew 24, those days will be shortened. Otherwise, no life would survive on planet Earth. There would be a head-on collision with this thing. And so, once again, these things that we have always assumed to be true and literal in the Scripture, who have always been attacked by others as just symbolic and so forth, we are finding that, oh no, they're not symbolic. They are absolutely literal, and here is their manifestation coming right at you. And his be the tail of the dragon, drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and he did cast them to earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. So we know this dragon is in the region of Virgo. And what we see coming right now is, coming right out of Virgo, we have this planetary system, Nibiru. And the interesting thing is, and certainly most important for those of us who are in the household of faith, is what happens to this man-child. And it says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. This characterizes the man-child, right? It's not just any man-child. It's one who is destined to rule the world and rule the nations with a rod of iron. And I have to read to you over here in Revelation chapter 2 and verse 26 and 27, 28. Let me read some more to you here. It says, and he who overcomes and he who keeps my employment until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as vessels of the potter are broken into pieces. As also I have received authority from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. And he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This admonition wasn't necessarily to Thyatira alone. It was an admonition to the church, to those who keep his deeds, the overcomers, and to them he will give authority over the nations. Now, To me, if you look at all the evidence of this man-child is to rule with a rod of iron, perfectly consistent with what John was told in the admonition to the church at Thyatira. This places this man-child as the church. And as soon as the church was born, now that's an interesting possibility here. It could be that on Pentecost, on 33 AD, that the church was not born, but it was conceived. And now it is being born after it has gone through its 9 months of in the womb. It is now coming out of the womb, being born, and there is only a certain number that will fill the requirement for the church that's already been decided by God. And as soon as that number is met, the church is caught up. And that caught up word, once again, is harpazo in the Greek, and it means to rescue from the danger of destruction. And boy, do I ever lean heavily upon that, because there is a danger of destruction, almost a certainty, coming upon planet Earth. And unless and until you have placed your faith in the one who acquits the guilty, there is no hope for you. But if you are found in his employment, and who overcomes, and how do you overcome? You put your faith in Jesus, because he is the one who overcame in your place. You put your place in him, and you become an overcomer, and then you have reason to believe that when this time comes that John saw, you will be taken up, and you will be rescued from the danger of destruction which is coming over the whole world. And then, of course, the woman who is now Israel flees into the wilderness, and we believe that fleeing and that flight is to Petra, where she will be maintained for 3.5 years. Just wanted to show you here of the Virgo planetary alignments on the day 9/23/17. That would be Rosh Hashanah this year. And you will see that Virgo has the moon under her feet. She is clothed with the sun. And above her head, you will see the constellation Leo, which has 9 prominent stars in it. And including those 9 stars, there are the planets Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And those are called wandering stars. That's where the word planet comes from. And so we have the 12 stars over her head and all of the other requirements mentioned in the Revelation 12 account. And those occur one time, on one day, and not for the last 7,000 years, nor for the 1,000 years into the future, as some have claimed to looked. This means there is a singular day coming up in which we should expect to be removed from this planet, removed from the danger of almost certain destruction, as this planet is being plowed into by this planetary system that is coming our way. So just thought I'd throw that picture in there to show you just what John saw. Moving on chapter 5, majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide, for he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and this one shall be peace. This is clearly a representation of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the anointed one, or as it says literally in the Hebrew, it's salvation, the anointed one. He is anointed for the purpose of bringing salvation, and along with him, he brings peace. He is the Prince of Peace. Those who pray for the peace of Jerusalem are really praying for the return of the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, because there will be no peace in Jerusalem until the Prince of Peace arrives, and upon his arrival, there will be no one that will confront him. He will have absolute control over this planet. He is the proverbial benevolent dictator. But more than a dictator, he is the king. and he rules in righteousness, and we shall rule with him. And we as the body, he as the head of the church. And then this passage goes on and says, when the Assyrian comes into our land, and when he treads in our palaces, and we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princely men. Well, the Assyrian is, in my view, the interpretation of this is the Antichrist and his system. That certainly is coming out of ancient Assyria. And at that time, there will be 7, well, this word shepherd literally is talking about a rabbi or a teacher, a religious leader of some sort. There will be 7 of those, and then 8 men of some renown rise up in the land of Israel and will do battle against the Antichrist and his kingdom. And here's a little shot of in green and light green. Gets way over there into Iran, and of course, you know my theory on that the Antichrist comes out of Iran, and that he is most certainly the current religious leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini. And so somewhere in that region, we're going to have 7 nations and 10, as it's characterized in Daniel, a nation that started off with 10, but 3 were turned up by the roots, and 7 were added on, so he ended up with a nation of 7 heads and 10 horns. It comes right out of there, and at some point in time, Israel will be wreaking vengeance upon them. And it says they will lay waste with the sword the land of Assyria and the land of Nimrod at its entrances, thus deliver us from the Assyrian when he comes into our land and when he treads within our borders. Well, I believe this is a referral to what we read in Daniel about the Antichrist and his final forays on planet Earth before he's destroyed. This is a picture of Nimrod's kingdom, and it just pretty much covers all the region of ancient Assyria and then some. By the way, the name Nimrod in the Hebrew means let us rebel. And when it says Nimrod was a man, mighty man, the word Gibberim in the Hebrew meaning a mighty man, that Nimrod was a mighty man before the Lord. That is a bad interpretation. It literally means he was a mighty man up in the face of the Lord, meaning in opposition to the Lord. And so, and that's what we find. Nimrod and his heathen wife Semiramis instituted the Mystery Babylon religion, certainly a rebellious religion that centered on them, both Nimrod and Semiramis. Of course, Nimrod was killed by Shem, lots of people believe, and his body dragged all over the countryside. But Semiramis survived, and her son Tammuz, the two of them became known in history as the mother and child religious system. You know, she claimed that after Nimrod died, that she was impregnated by a sunbeam and had Tammuz. Boy, try to sell that one today. But at any rate, the elements of that Mystery Babylon religion remain in the world even to this day. Our celebration of Easter. Easter is just an adulteration of a word Ishtar, which is the Canaanitic version of the Mystery Babylon religion. So it's been here, and at some point when the Lord comes, he will eliminate this rebellion once and for all. Continuing on in chapter 5, the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples, like the dew from the Lord, like showers on the grass, that tarry for no man nor wait for the sons of men. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many peoples, like a lion among the beasts of the forest, like a young lion among the flocks of the sheep. He, if he passes through, both treads down and tears in pieces, and none can deliver. Your hand shall be lifted up against your adversaries, and all your enemies shall be cut off. My take on this, the remnant of Jacob will be among the Gentiles. Well, where do you find the remnant of Jacob? Well, you remember Jacob in Genesis 48, blessed the 2 sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he said, let my name be upon them. So if you want to find Jacob in the end times, you've got to find the descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh. And you know my take on that. That Ephraim is manifested in the nation of Great Britain, The name Britan in Hebrew means covenant land. British means covenant man. So we believe also that the throne of David is existing this day in the land of Great Britain. That's where the British throne resides. It's sitting on the throne of David. So at any rate, and then Manasseh, that nation that speaks the loudest as the descendant of Manasseh, would be the United States. So we have both of the elements of Israel or Jacob in the end times to be found in the United States and Great Britain. And furthermore, there's a lion issue. If you look at the heraldry of Great Britain, you find the lions in two places. He's once there on the left and then another time on top of that royal crest. So it gives you some other suspicion to believe that maybe we got it right. Moving right along, and it shall be in that day, says the Lord. You know, and I ever see that phrase, in that day, Hayam Hayu, means the day of the Lord. And we know the day of the Lord is characterized by certainly beginning at the time of the tribulation and carrying on to the end of the world, the end of the Olam, the end of the Athid Lavo. And at the end of the Athid Lavo begins the Olam Haba, which is the time the Jews believe is time without counting. So at any rate, in that day, which we're about to come upon very soon, that I will cut off your horses from your midst and destroy your chariots, and I will cut off your cities of your land and throw down all your strongholds, and I will cut off sorceries from your hand and shall have no soothsayers. Your carved images I will cut off, and your sacred pillars in your midst, and you will no more worship the work of your hands, and I will pluck the wooden images from your midst. Thus I will destroy your cities, and I will execute vengeance in anger and fury on those nations which have not obeyed. Well, once again, these prophecies that we read in the Old Testament have been interpreted as metaphors or similes, and by some. I've always taken the position that these were literal. Didn't know how they were going to happen, but I believe they were going to happen, and I think you too can see the reasons why now. This time of vengeance of the Lord in which he comes, and everything that is in opposition to him, be it an idea, be it an idol, even a city, he is going to destroy them all. The works of man's hands are going to be cut off from the land, and there will be no other idols in the land, and there will only be one God, and his name will be Jehovah Elohim, Yahweh Elohim, and his son, Yeshua HaMashiach, salvation, the anointed one. He alone will be king over the earth. And it says, I will execute vengeance in my anger. This is a time of vengeance that's coming over the world to test those who live upon the earth or who are tied to the system. The admonition in Revelation 3:10 is that, words to the effect that, well, I'll even read it. It says, because you have kept the word of my perseverance, I will keep you from the hour of testing. That word testing is tribulation. The hour which has come over the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. There is a testing coming, and those who have kept his word, well, they are promised that they will be kept from this hour of testing. Not through it, but from it. There is an entirely different word in the Greek. So, how are we kept from this time of testing, this time of tribulation, this time of the vengeance of God? There's only one way. And that way is you have to get off of this planet. And there is only one way that that can happen. And that is only promised to those who have put their faith in the one who acquits the guilty. And that, of course, is Jesus, known as Yeshua HaMashiach, salvation, the anointed one. And he is coming soon, and he will be king over all the earth. And those of us who have been found in faith with him will rule and reign with him for that 1,000 years and on into eternity. God bless. We'll see you next week.